Hey everybody, what's up? Chad Wesley Smith here for the Jug Life podcast. On today's episode, Max and I talk about how we kind of arrived at our current coaching philosophies, sort of the steps and stages along the way as our development from young athletes to the coaches you know now, and how our philosophies were developed, who helped develop them, what experiences in our life got us to where we are now. Today's episode is brought to you by Rhone. If you want great looking clothing for any occasion, in the gym, on the golf course, at work, whatever it is, Rhone has got you covered. They first sponsored the podcast several months ago. They sent me a gift card to get some stuff. And since then, I've made several orders, all on my own, paying for the clothes myself because I like it so much. Whether it's like this, the Peak Polo, the Sentry Tank, all kinds of great shorts, Guru shorts, Mako shorts. I've got bathing suits from them, all sorts of stuff. You can visit Rhone.com and use Jug Life for 20% off from them. Great company. If you're interested in online coaching, Juggernaut apparel, or our books, visit jtsstrength.com. And of course, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, go on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review on the Jug Life podcast, and enjoy the episode.
Coming to you from Orange County, California, this is the Jug Life Podcast with Max Ada and Chad Wesley Smith.
What is up, buddy? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, yeah.
Fresh off the plane from Lima, Peru?
I don't know if the word fresh would describe the way I got off the plane from Peru, but yeah.
Do you still have your Machu Picchu calf pump going on?
They're still sore. My left leg is noticeably more sore than my right, which I think is probably related to being, super crooked or like a hip shift, but you definitely notice after about 1,000 steps that you're not quite even there.
And it was a great day for Cicacia down there?
Yeah, Cicacia killed it. Had an awesome day, 5 for 6. Took the gold in the snatch against Lady Soleil from Colombia, which was awesome. And then, just finally had one of those like really good 5 for 6 meets that she's needed to have. And, ended with a 241 total, which is a PR, competition PR snatch, comp PR clean and jerk, lifetime PR clean and jerk as well. And, it was just like came to win and did everything she could.
And Roby-wise, it seems pretty... she's only 9th on that Pan list. It does seem pretty solid.
Yeah, she's only 9th on the list, but it puts her in a good spot because she's like, the 76s are kind of up in the air for Pan Ams. My assumption is that Kate and I may pass going to Pan Ams, which would put us as the number 176. So, we're also at 241, which gives us a little bit of an edge against Rogers if she just decides to switch to 76. We'd be ahead of her, so she'd have to, repeat a good performance and do like a 242 to get ahead of us. So it's a good overall position to be in for her.
Nice. Well, I'm excited for AO in a couple weeks. That's going to be a very fun meet.
Yeah, a lot of people going.
So what I want to talk about today, and something we get asked, my email's been blowing up. A lot of people have been asking about my skincare routine. But
in between those emails, what other emails are you getting?
that they ask about, good resources and stuff like that. But, well, it's easy enough to just list off like a couple books or something. I think coaching philosophy and mentors and influences is probably the bigger topic that I want to talk. So we'll talk about, sort of how you and I have each arrived with the ideas that we have now. And for me, certainly, that began as an athlete. I think probably for basically any coach, unless they were formally, trained just as a coach, through some,
some weird
Soviet or Chinese. Well, because even the Chinese weightlifting coaches, they have to have been like a national level.
I think a national champion.
Yeah,
I think you have to be a real.
And so you're basically a world champion.
Yeah,
then.
Yeah. And even in like Russia, I've heard like Vladimir Safonov, when he came here, he said there's no like top coaches that weren't at least like national team members.
Yeah. So and then I've heard that interview with Zatsorowski where he talks about their coaching education
Yeah.
system, and it's like a 4-year degree. But short of going through a 4-year coaching degree, most people's coaching journey and ideas about coaching probably comes from what they did themselves as athletes, and that was certainly the case for me as I began like forming these ideas of what is effective, and it was a lot of trial and error, and I've with the minor exceptions, stuff I'll talk about as we go, but have pretty much written my own program since I was 14 years old. And
is there a big difference between the 14-year-old Chad Wesley Smith program and the 28-year-old Chad Wesley Smith program?
For a 14-year-old, I wasn't doing too bad.
I remember you telling me one time that you, and maybe you were younger than 14, maybe this is before the formal programming, you had like tied some rubber bands to a tree.
Yeah, I guess if we were to go even farther back, this whole process began with seeing Rocky IV for the first time.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're most good coaches.
Yeah.
Start.
Rocky IV training montage, Cool Runnings training montages.
Fantastic, yeah. Chariots of Fire maybe thrown in there.
Yeah, all the classics. But yeah, that was that I was getting ready to play Pop Warner Junior All-American football for the first year, and I knew that it was like a tryout kind of thing. Like not everyone made the team, I guess, which now thinking back on it, for 8, 9, 10-year-olds seems very unlikely. But at least in my mind, I was like, I got to make the team. Little Giants training montage probably came into play big with that one.
Possibly heavyweights. Yeah. For me, for sure.
So I was taking like the car, like bungee cords that you would tie stuff down in the back of a truck with.
Yeah.
And lashing those together, putting them around my waist, and like running against band resisted sprints in my backyard. I think I was 9. I was 8 or 9.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So that's where it really began. But yeah, more so at 14 is when I started lifting weights and trying to learn about lifting weights on the internet in the year 2000.
Oh, man.
Nearly 20 years ago.
That's so crazy to think.
It was a much different place. Elite FTS existed, but way smaller. DeepSquatter.com.
Yeah. Dr. Squat had his forum too.
Yeah, the Dr. Squat, that was a big one. There was some Australian Olympic lifting page.
Yeah, Queensland Weightlifting Association.
Yeah, Queensland Weightlifting Association. I did the Critical Bench program.
Yeah.
But the big thing for me back then was I had an understanding, and it probably worked well because everyone likes to do what they're good at.
Yeah.
And especially when you're 14, 15, 16 years old, it's probably even more true. I was good at squats and cleans and jumps and sprints, and I don't know if it was confirmation bias that brought me to this, but it was also I understood that's what's important for being good at football and throwing the shot put, and so the first coach in that process who was very influential to me was Tony Chiarelli. So Tony Chiarelli is a football, weightlifting, throws coach, was then at Huntington Beach High School, but most of his career at Newport Harbor High School in Newport Beach, California. Incredible results for high school throwers.
Yeah.
He has a kid who just signed to UCLA who threw like 64 and 198 as a junior in high school.
Damn.
I mean, if his top 10 list of throwers he's coached, I think takes 59 or 60 feet to make it in the shot put.
Wow.
And like 188 or 190 feet in the discus.
Good Lord.
He had, I think, 2 of the top 3, maybe 3 of the top 5 discus throwers ever in high school in California. Also, was like a level 4 or 5 weightlifting coach, as is his wife. His daughter, he has one daughter who's the throws coach at UCI. His other daughter was a resident at the Olympic Training Center, was on a Pan Am team or two for weightlifting.
Right.
And he had this clinic that I would go to, I think pretty much every year. It's a one day clinic, the World Class Throws Clinic, and it was a month or so before the track season started, and it was remarkable. The coaches we got exposed to there and the athletes we got exposed to, because he had multiple Olympians.
Yeah.
Guys who were trying to get on the Olympic team at the time: Jared Rome, Ian Waltz, people who had been and would go on to be Olympians like Jason Tunks, Carl Brown, Mac Wilkins, Bill Starr. Was there one of the years. I think he was there when I went as a coach, and he really hammered home that idea, because he was a weightlifting coach.
Yeah.
And trains his throwers very much with weightlifting, and very much like weightlifters often, but hammered home this idea that throwing and being an athlete is about jumping high and generating power from the lower body and throwing medicine balls and all that kind of stuff. And that stuck with me and was like the first true understanding that I had of like, this is where power and how powerful athletes are created. And Tony was a huge influence, and it's been cool, now 20 years, almost 20 years later, I live down the street and we're friends and talk about training and stuff. So for you first getting into weightlifting, what was that sort of spark?
It was a lot of the same kind of thing, like, being young and I mean, I watched, when I first got into it, I had seen the 96 Olympics and saw Naeem Suleimanoglu win his third gold, and was, that was like this iconic moment for me. And I remember, wanting to always be strong and wanting to kind of pursue that. But when I saw the Olympics, I was like, I'm a weightlifter, right? I'm going to be a weightlifter. So it started with a lot of the same kind of stuff where you just kind of are figuring things out on your own and doing stuff on your own. But eventually I got connected with the strength coach at Montana State, who I, funny enough, was like roommates with Chris Bell in UCLA or USC. And I think even Spitz, Dave Spitz, from like all three of them knew each other, right? But so I got connected with him, and then he introduced me to Steve Goff, who basically was like the first that was my first introduction to like formal coaching, as formal as that was. But it was much more of like a trial by fire kind of thing, where you'd look online, you'd find stuff, you'd find programs and things, and you had a coach at the same time who's telling you something. So it was much more of like there was not the pedigree that Sorelli had, where like, oh, this guy's like produced a bunch of people consistently. It was more like, let's kind of figure this out as we go. And that's I think from an influential standpoint, it's like, wow, you learned a lot of shit that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Maybe you learn that early on, but your execution of like stopping the shitty things that aren't working takes a long time. But yeah, I mean, it was initially just basically like calling up USAW, like looking on their website, finding the coach in town. There happened to be a guy who was, working for the university. He happened to live on the same street as me. And I just called him up and walked up there and was like, I want to be a weightlifter. And, kind of went from there.
And then he's like, this is a max squat.
Yeah, here's a squat. You can just do these as many times as you want forever. So
the other thing, that was great about Tony for me in this process was, because I went to a school known for its academics, not its athletics.
Yeah.
That when I would be at these track meets, I was like the only good person on my high school track team.
Huge standout amongst the other youths from Irvine.
Yeah. So I was, they were all at SAT prep classes, and I was lifting weights, getting the easy way to make it to Berkeley. Not like where you have to get a 4.5 GPA. But I would be at these track meets, the bigger meets, Orange County Championship, stuff like that, on my own. And my coach, who is Coach Len Blutrick, phenomenal coach, coached me my junior and senior in high school. His son, Brian, is now the throws coach at Arizona State, was a 92 Olympian in the discus, national throws coach of the year, I bet 4 or 5 times now between his tenures at
Damn.
ASU, University of Oklahoma, University of North Carolina. Coach Blue was great and hugely influential in my career, but I would almost call him more of a technical consultant.
Nah.
He coached my throwing, but even in high school, I did my own lifting and everything. And Coach Blue was a college coach, so he wasn't at my high school meets with me. Very, very rarely, like state meet, maybe one other.
Yeah.
So I was typically at these meets by myself, and I was so interested in lifting and training and how to improve, and knew that talking to coaches and was like the best way to figure out how to do this, that I just latched on to Chiarelli. Was buddies with one of the guys that he was coaching, and then also a coach named Bill Pendleton at Esperanza in Orange County, who's he'll probably have, I think, what's going to be his second 70-foot shot putter. Guy just committed to Cal.
He's got a ton of kids there.
Yeah.
And see, when they came to Juggernaut back then, it was crazy.
That kid, the one like stocky little blonde kid who was, I think, a freshman then.
Yeah.
He's a senior now, threw like 67 feet last year, just committed to Cal. Bench was like 430.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Holy cow.
Yeah. And so I really just like latched on to those guys and would keep asking them questions at the meet, like probably until they were sick of talking to me, maybe past that point. And as I got into college and started to read more about training, I guess if that was, well, maybe the Rocky montages, that's stage, that was phase 1 of learning how to coach or developing my philosophy. High school was phase 2. And early in college, I'd say that's kind of the next distinct part for me. Was I came to Cal on a track scholarship, and our coach had us doing what she had us doing, and I wasn't getting much stronger. And then I think it was my maybe summer between my freshman and sophomore year, I'd started reading a lot more, learning about this thing called conjugate periodization.
It is. Finally he's admitting it.
Yes. The conjugate periodization was getting really into reading. I at that time and for several years after, when West Side apologists, defenders, whatever, want to say like, oh, Chad doesn't even know what he's talking about. I've read up to that point, had read every single article on their website, every single article on West Side, every single article on Elite FTS. Printed them out, printed them off my computer, highlighting things, keeping notes on them. Side note to that, I understand if you're listening to this and you're like, well, Chad doesn't really understand it. You're wrong. I understand everything about training better than you do. Like, if you're someone who's sitting there thinking, no, he's wrong, West Side does work, it's even more true that I understand everything about training more than you do.
Well, I mean, shit, you were using accommodating resistance at 6 years old.
Yes. That's true. But I'd read all that stuff, and I was so fucking into it.
Yeah.
And I remember going back to my coaches at Cal, being like, hey, can I do some of this stuff? And they were very apprehensive about it. And I remember talking to Tony about it, and Tony, I gotta ask him this story. I gotta record him telling me this story because I know he was there, and I know that you probably know guys that were there. It was like an NSCA conference in late 90s, and there was like the USAW group, and then there was like Louis and
Oh, I've heard of this, yeah.
And Louis was basically made his presentation and like saying how the weightlifters, saying what Louis says, American weightlifting coaches don't know how to get people strong,
blah,
and
blah.
they need to do stiff leg fat bar snatches and stuff. Stiff leg trap bar snatches, probably.
The old trap bar snatch.
Yeah. And then there was like this incredible tension in this conference room. I think Tony was there. I'm sure. I think it was like Tony and Mike Bergner and those kind of guys were there. I got to ask him about it. But I remember like asking Tony about this stuff and like, man, this is a coach that I really respect and look up to. and him calling them like those West Side guys or those powerlifting guys, and like really like scoffing at the idea that I'd brought up, and that was such like I was like, oh my God, like I don't know how to react right now. Like my parents are fighting. I don't know which one do I side with. and it being like, and I decided to go with the West Side.
It's like a moment where you finally, like, all of the Bill Cosby stuff comes out, and you're like, but I really love Mr. Huxtable. So you can't decide.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was like, I was the same kind of stuff, like with this is a little different because you had a lot of exposure to actual coaches and people that had different opinions, and, Sorelli's camp and stuff, where I was completely isolated, and I had one coach who had, who was, probably clinically insane, and had one methodology. But I was exposed to a lot of the same writing and stuff online, so I had that sort of foundation under me. But I didn't have the actual like being able to talk to a real coach who could tell you there's something different about somebody saying like, "Hey, here's the program, here's what's written," and then a coach explaining what they do. It's so different because the program can seem, every little variable can seem so significant and important, and when you don't understand any like of principles or anything bigger than just sets and reps, you're looking at something and it's like dramatic. It's really like, oh my God, like how important is it to do 70% for 3 sets instead of 4 sets? And so you're always in this, like, being isolated like that, I was always into this problem of, like, the details of things. How important is detail? So you see something like West Side, and it's all about details. It's all about these, like, ridiculous, like, charts and numbers. It seems so overwhelming that, like, this must be real. This must be really true, because there's no way anyone would write a fucking book or, write an article. I mean, he's got 800, 700-pound deadlifters. And it'd just be like numbers and lists. And the stuff seems so complex where you're like...
overwhelming in its... What appears to be its complexity and...
Yeah, and you're just kind of trapped by that. And so, like, I remember it really was like, for me, it was like, I always believed, early on, I was like, believed that, like, West Side must be better because it's all about science and numbers and accommodating resistance and circumax phases. Yeah. And, obviously as time goes on, you get exposed to other coaches who can explain things and be like, yeah, well, this is like what's really going on.
Yeah. And it's as many jokes as we make about West Side, I did very well for myself, using those ideas, for my own training as I through the shot put and for when I started coaching, and I began, as a professional coach in the sense that I was being paid to coach athletes. The summer after my freshman year of college, I came back and like ran our summer lifting conditioning program for our high school football team, and then did the same thing. And then the next summer after that, I came back. I had transferred away from Cal at that point and came back to be defensive line coach and run all the summer conditioning, off-season stuff, and it was so many of those West Side articles and Elite FTS articles, that specific ones don't stand out in my mind, but DeFranco, West Side for Skinny Bastards, and then there was an article on Elite FTS by Joe Ken called Max Effort Training for the Front Seven.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I'd seen like something that seemed very systematic in its individualization towards different position groups and even back then, this was 2000 and summer of 2006 that I started again professionally coaching. I was 19 or just turned 20. And that was like I was able to kind of take that article and extrapolate it, out from what he had for the offensive and defensive linemen for, linebacker, tight end types, and then wide receivers, defensive backs, and that was like a big moment.
Yeah.
I think for me of understanding like, all right, this is how these principles, even though it's not stuff that I would do now necessarily, it was still important. That's how these principles can be changed for different
I think, yeah,
needs.
I think that's like the biggest thing that West Side really did, and from a positive impact it had, in the fact that it appeared that prior to what West Side and what Louis and those guys kind of pushed, it was about like a program. Like, here's the 5x5 program, and the program was just this static thing that existed. That was, you just do this. You're a football player. This is what you do. Maybe there would be some programs written for like different positions on a football team or like different sports, but it's basically just like, here's the hard and fast, recipe for what you do. Whereas Westside kind of introduced the concept of a system via, the Russian Soviet weightlifting system, which was like, hey, like there's solutions for everything that exists within this because it's a system. It's, plug and play different pieces to get the recipe for this position or for that sport or whatever. Whereas that just didn't exist before. So I think that was, like you're saying, like a huge leap forward in thinking. Was the application of it really excellent, or the execution probably not the best, but the fact that it was a system was a huge leap forward.
Yeah. That is, a big point of credit, I think, to give to Louis and to West Side.
We can edit this all out later.
in my coaching development, for sure, is assessing what an athlete needs, and they talk about it mostly from figuring out what your weak point is in the squat, bench, and deadlift. But that idea can be extrapolated out to the needs analysis for an athlete in a multimodal sport where they have to have speed and strength and endurance and everything, and where are they lacking, and how does that all fit together? Again, the application they use for it is not what I choose to do, obviously now, and then for me, working with athletes and still throwing the shot put and stuff at that point in my own career, the other big takeaway from it was move heavy shit fast.
Yeah.
And that right. That holds true to still be very useful for team sport athletes like football players and shot putters, is move heavy shit fast and always putting an emphasis on the intent. I think it was really, really important. Yeah.
I think the kind of next, like the next step from there was a much longer step though. Like going from the idea of like programs are these things that are static and like, 5x5 is the best program, to there's systems that are in place that are, okay, like you have to create a system that has answers for different problems, to where I think like the next logical move from there for me was really like Mike Israetel and you, and kind of seeing that, okay, shit, like the concept of principles are way bigger and way more foundational than systems themselves, because systems and programs are built on principles. And then, seeing that move was not as quick a change from, okay, like there's programs, Westside has like a system. It was years of like seeing people kind of floundering around with, probably between like 2000 and really like 2000. I don't know when you guys wrote Principles.
2014.
So you got like, I would say a good 14 years in there where like Westside was dominating, bouncing around this idea. It almost stifled the progress, I think, because people looked at Westside as like, okay, what are the solutions within Westside for athletes? So it became like, well, you do more speed work for football players, or you do something like, whatever, this silly kind of like really weird special exercises that have no bearing on sport form for a team sport. And like people are constantly looking for the answer they weren't finding because they're looking in the wrong place. Until you see principles, until you kind of step back to that foundational stuff, you don't actually have the answers to the problem. So as a coach, moving from like programs to systems to principles was like this big shift for me, at least later on.
Well, and so for me, I went through doing a lot of different programs.
Yeah.
Whether it was these amalgams of Queensland weightlifting plus critical bench times jump soles, which I did, and those were some
Yeah.
hell long days right there. To West Side stuff, to the programs they had us doing it at Cal. This whole time, you were just doing the same thing.
Yeah.
The same thing. And I think it's very rare that a coach who has such a long history of doing one thing, and even if it's one discipline, like if you have a strength coach, a strength and conditioning coach who spent their entire career competing in weightlifting, they are very, very likely to use a lot of weightlifting in training their athletes.
Yeah.
Same thing holds true with powerlifting. If in the unfortunate case that someone does kettlebell sport, they're probably really big on using kettlebells. But not only was your entire, so much of your athletic career spent doing weightlifting, it was spent doing one extremely narrow vein of weightlifting.
Oh my God, yeah.
If you guys haven't heard about Rhone, you're really missing out. Rhone is a men's performance lifestyle and premium activewear brand that is engineered for unparalleled quality and comfort. They're an absolute necessity for guys on the go. It doesn't matter if you're training in the gym, getting on a flight. They are your new go-to men's clothing brand. My favorite are the Peak Polos, which I can wear out to dinner. I can wear on the golf course. On the occasion that I have a fancy, juggernaut meeting, I need to get out of gym clothes. I'll put it on for that as well. I also really like the Sentry tanks to train in, the Mako shorts, Guru shorts, got a ton of different stuff from Rhone. Their variety is really what's best. They make something for the modern man regardless of occasion. So from shorts, shirts, tank tops, socks, swimwear, Rhone engineers clothing perfect for the office, long flights, and commutes. And now they just released their amazing new commuter collection. So they're perfect for looking great, staying comfortable at the office. You're riding the subway to work, you got a lunch meeting, whatever it is, Commuter Collection has got you covered with style and versatility. It is the performance alternative to everyday workwear, offering everything from pants, polos, shorts, and shirts. They're all lightweight, comfortable, and wrinkle-free. The Commuter Collection is good for all weather, anytime from a weekday in the workplace or to a weekend barbecue. So go to Rhone.com/Juglife today and use the promo code JUGLIFE to get 20% off your first purchase. That's RHONE.com/Juglife, promo code JUGLIFE for 20% off. Rhone.com/Juglife, promo code JUGLIFE. So there had to be, was there ever a time when you started coaching lifters that you coached them in the same way in the Bulgarian system?
Probably like the very first few people I worked with, I was like, well, we'll do some variation of what we're doing to out myself for being wrong in these things. When I was doing all of that training, I was very well read in all of these other things. Like I knew everything that from Elite, I read every article every Friday, like T Nation, or it was Testosterone Net.
T Nation used to have good articles.
Yeah, and I read
like Charlie Francis articles and shit.
Yeah, and Charlie Francis. And then I was
saying that, by the way, I mean that they don't have good articles. Yeah. If you didn't get the insinuation.
And Verkhoshansky, when he was still alive, he had his forum, he had his whole thing. Like I read through everything. I always was super into that, and I read all the Russian translations and everything, but I was still doing that stuff because I had a coach that was coaching me, and so I just did what we were supposed to do. Because obviously buying in and believing in what you're doing is super important. So there came a point though where like I knew what we were doing wasn't right. I knew it wasn't working.
And to quickly clarify for people, Steve Goff is nicknamed the American Butcher after Max's other coach of more note, Ivan Abajev, the Butcher. So
the original Butcher.
Yeah. So from the start of your weightlifting career with any formal coaching, you were doing the Bulgarian system
to the extreme.
Yeah. Whether it was under Steve Goff or under Abajev.
Yeah. So I knew, like I was very well aware of what was existing outside of what I was doing and could grasp like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like there's this process, there's a system to it. There's a solution if you have this problem. There's like things you should do that are different. But obviously like the execution, which I think is the biggest component of being a good coach, I didn't do. I didn't change my program. I didn't do those things. But going through that and knowing all of those things, when I first started coaching people, I initially was like, well, I'll coach what I believe is right because I've bought into it, because I'm in this. That's what we're doing is coaching Bulgarian stuff. It was always going to be less than what I did. I was never going to have any squat 10 times in a day or 5 times in a day or snatch to maximum every day. But it was very much in this vein of like the same logic. Well, if you want to get good at snatching, then just snatch. Or you want to get good at clean jerks, then just clean jerk. Or, these kind of like what you call like a isms, but like, it's just like this really simple cereal box kind of answer to something like, oh, if your clean jerks are bad, you got to train heavier, or like you can't PR unless you're going heavy all the time. When you step back and think about it, you're like, those are fucking retarded. Like, I can't believe I was that dumb. But you also realize like, okay, you're kind of just stuck in this place where you have a few tools because you only know these things. So it's difficult to just jump in and apply something you don't understand or don't have experience with. So yeah, I mean, the first people I coached were, sorry, but you guys got fucked over.
I mean, did you switch it up at all? Like,
yeah, so
like
then
doing jerks from the rack instead of from blocks, or
a remarkable amount of individualizing your own program by switching the exercise. I did. Yeah, there was a point where, and probably like the same point with every coaching evolution I've had, where it came from a moment of like, okay, you're coaching somebody and the greatest teacher you're ever going to have is failure, because like, shit, this person just didn't do well and they're not getting better, and it's obvious. When you become a professional coach, people pay you for that service and they stop paying you for that service because you're doing a bad job. You very quickly realize that you need to get better. So, I can't remember every single moment, but I do remember distinct times where people would perform better when I did something different that was maybe drawn from different, from a book or something. Oh, look at the Russian system or look at how other coaches are doing things and say, I'm going to try something that's in that vein and move things towards that direction. And you see progress, you see an improvement. That was like, those were the moments that just kind of kept happening where it'd be like, hey, I'm going to do it differently than this. I'm going to do it differently than this. I'm going to change this. We're not going to squat as much or this and that. And you have a little evolution where you're like, okay, this is a better way to do that. This is a better way to approach it. And you just kind of have these over and over. I think at some point you get to a point though where you and I did as a coach too early on, like you can think that like, oh, it's about always finding the next thing that's right. And, every coach has these little epiphanies and these changes to what they do until they get, they start getting closer to the bullseye. But then when you're close to the bullseye, it stops becoming about finding the next best thing. It becomes about executing the system better and finding, hey, we know this is right. How do I apply it in a way that makes it as effective as possible? So you're not looking for something new. You're looking for
the micro changes, not macro changes.
Yeah. And the adjustments to like, if adherence to the program is better, the program works better. Or if the program is, just done in a way where, we're monitoring technique better or we're doing these little things better, yeah, you get the same kind of effect. So it was definitely like knowing I was wrong initially and then slowly breaking away from that in practice.
Yeah, I think the next big phase of development for me, so I really start to discover Westside, Conjugate, all that stuff. Mind you, I'm reading all these things that are articles about multiply powerlifting training, and I did not understand that multiply power, like what that was, what that meant. I just read the article and it said this guy squatted 1,100 pounds. Well, I was 19 and could squat, 650-ish pounds. So that wasn't like that far-fetched of an idea to me. I figured, okay, I'm a sophomore now. By the time I'm a redshirt senior, I'll probably squat like 800 or 850 or something. And so some other guy doing 1100, that wasn't,
Yeah.
that,
Probably graduate college with a 1250 squat. That's my guess.
like these ideas were not that outlandish to me.
Yeah.
Especially when, being in the throwing world, I'm seeing stuff about Udo Bayer and Greg Torfalis and thinking like, okay, well, these guys are doing 950 or 400 kilos for 5. So
Udo Bayer. This is some guy in Germany, I think. He was pretty strong. Yeah. I can get there.
So that's like summer 2005 where I start learning about that stuff, and 2005, 6, 7, 8, I'm coaching high school football. I'm training for the shot put myself, and I am balls deep into Westside. If you told me in 2008 that Westside doesn't work, I was ready to fight you.
How many fire beanies did you own?
Thankfully none, but I definitely had a different.
A yellow West Side shirt, a fire beanie.
No, but you can find pictures of me my senior year of college at track meets with the black West Side shirt.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And just listened to a lot angrier music, and it was just a different man. And I said this before, but like 23-year-old Chad Wesley Smith, he would fucking hate 33-year-old Chad Wesley Smith, and that's not. I think some people could say that about themselves because they turned into sellouts or whatever. That this is only true because 23-year-old Chad Wesley Smith was clearly a buffoon. Yeah. But no, so I was so fucking into it, like legit would be ready, like would want to fight someone if they were telling me that it didn't work. And just as we were talking about this, it brought up this memory of a time where I was so pissed about someone telling me that the way I was training was wrong. And
wow.
It was in very early Juggernaut days. I was friends with Bob Eilenfeld, the angry coach. And I was still, training him, throwing the shot put. Had just finished, I had just opened Juggernaut, so I had just finished my senior year of college. This great year. I threw, 10 feet farther than I had thrown the year before.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. And Bob Eilenfeld was friends with one of our mutual friends, James Smith.
Yeah.
And Bob, he wrote under the pen name The Angry Coach, and he was very much that. He was this, Long Island or like Staten Island, Long Island, just fucking gruff New Yorker, tell it like it is. And we're talking one day, and he's like, oh yeah, I was talking to James Smith, and he says you're training like a fucking idiot. And I was like, what the fuck did he say about my training? This fucking thinker, nerd, jackass. and
does he know how many thousands of pounds of barbell volume I do every day before I warm up?
Yeah, I was so fucking pissed. And I remember him telling me that and just seething about it. And then Bob convincing me to talk to James on the phone, or that James wanted to talk to me. And maybe Bob delivered James's message a bit more gruffly than James had, but
It's definitely not the way James would have said it.
Well, not in a presentation, but to Bob, I could have seen him saying it like that. Yeah, now that I know James. But anyways, James was doing that not to be like, oh, this Chad Smith guy is a fucking jackass. He was doing it because he genuinely wanted to help.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't bring it up quite the right way.
Yeah.
To get his message across. But anyways, I talked to him on the phone, and he begins explaining to me this idea of special strength and Dr. Bondarchuk and this was probably late 2009, very early 2010. And I heard him. I probably did go into the conversation with a bit of a closed mind, because I was like, this guy's, what the fuck shot putter has he ever coached? So how much weight has he lifted? I'm stronger. I do this better. And didn't want to listen to him, but did do my best to hear him out. And at the end of the conversation, a lot of what he said resonated with me, in that I understood what its value could be, but I did not understand it well enough to apply it for myself.
Yeah.
I remember feeling caught it kind of between these two situations of he was telling me to step back from the really heavy lifting that I was doing and the really hard, max effort work. And in my mind, basically, he was telling me to stop being so strong.
Yeah.
And do more of these kind of weird, harder to measure exercises and to throw more. And I got that concept, but I didn't know how to apply it for myself.
Yeah.
So I felt like, well, if I don't do that stuff, if I don't do the special strength stuff right, and now I'm not lifting as hard, now I'm just not as strong.
Yeah.
Nor do I have this, not as generally strong. Nor do I have the special strength to balance it out, and then I'm fucked. So I didn't, and in hindsight, I probably should have just asked James, like, well, can you write this for me, but that was the first kind of time where I heard something. I heard it be explained, and I was like, he has a point.
Yeah, yeah.
And I couldn't quite commit to it, so I kept doing what I was doing, and then I finished my throwing career in May 2010, and I guess around that same time that Bob had delivered this message to me from James, I had the opportunity, because I was sponsored by Elite FTS at this time, I had the opportunity where I was supposed to go out to Ohio for an Elite FTS event, and I was going to go to Westside on Friday and Elite on Saturday.
Yeah.
And this is in the time where James Smith says this guy is training like an asshole, and I'm like, where the fuck does he live? Send location, because fuck this guy. I'm going to fight him because he said that Westside doesn't work. So I'm ready to go on a religious pilgrimage for me out there.
A duffel bag full of chains and bands and fire beanies.
The trip was really a trip for me to go to Elite FTS, and that for some reason got canceled. So I didn't end up going, and I wasn't gonna go, or I couldn't probably afford to go to just see Westside or whatever, or make the trip on my own without it being like an official Elite FTS thing or whatever. So I ended up not going, and in some sort of butterfly effect, alternate dimensions, we're rolling the dice of and each number has a different possible universe that we're living in. There is a universe in which I go to this trip.
Yeah.
And I wonder, had I done that, if I would have been so far down the rabbit hole of...
You would have crossed the event horizon. There's no way out of it. There would have been no way back.
That's somewhere, at about 6:30 a.m. at a Bob Evans in Columbus, Ohio, I would have passed a point of no return.
Yeah.
And from there to the end of history, I would have forever been ready to fight someone who said that Westside doesn't work.
You would, if you had gone, you would have been on ESPN3 in the WPO a couple weeks ago. You'd have been up there.
I would probably fucking slaughter those guys.
But you would be training like them, so it'd be equal.
Yes.
You'd be squatting 12 and a half inches high.
I'd actually have to jump.
You only go up in the squat somehow.
But yeah, so I wonder, what that universe. That's a scary place. It's a scary world to live in, and so again, then fast forward back to like May or June 2010. I had still been doing Westside. I meanwhile had written the Juggernaut method and had gotten away from using Westside as much with athletes at the gym, though I was still using it some, and even I'm not opposed to using it now, particularly in like a short time frame situation with like a speed power team sport athlete. But I remember I did my last track meet, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to do a powerlifting meet. I've only done box squats for the last 3 years. I had not done a free squat, I don't think.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And yeah, probably maybe 3 going on 4 years.
When you box squatted, did you use like a real wide stance and sit way back, or did you squat more like a normal?
I mean, wider.
Yeah.
Not like I wasn't trying to like put my feet under
Chuck
the
Vogel
outside
style
of the power rack or anything, but I was definitely trying to, sit back, open my knees more. Like,
Did you feel, because you and I are built pretty similar, like at least our like lower bodies, where like I always felt like trying to squat like that made me feel so weak, like squatting more wide and sitting back a lot more, where it's just, I mean, my experience with Westside was much shorter than yours, but like I always remember feeling like this is really unnatural feeling, like it didn't feel strong at all. And I'm just curious because like I wonder how much that just like plays into those kind of things for somebody.
Yeah, it's I don't have a specific memory of that. I think I had box squatted 725. And I was squatting to like a legitimate box height.
Yeah.
And you can go back in old Juggernaut YouTube videos and find videos of me doing cambered bar box squats with chains and safety squat bar box
Lord.
with bands and all this kind of stuff. And so it was like a legit box height. And so I'd done 725, and then I was like, all right, I gotta see what I can squat, because there's no box at the meet.
It's probably like 950.
Yeah, I'm glad that I had that amount of sense to not just show up to the meet and be like, all right, well.
How much weight did you get stapled with?
I remember squatting, I want to say I think I squatted 550 for either 3 or 5 reps.
After a 7 1/4 box squat.
Yeah, so it's
Okay. Not bad.
not that far off.
Yeah.
But I also remember feeling like this is a lot different. And the bottom part was really hard. Like, and it at that was like the next moment where I was like, I can't do this. This is not what's going to make me good at powerlifting. And so I did the Juggernaut method, exactly as written in the first book for that meet, and squatted 800, and I know that the heaviest squat I did in training in sleeves, or not even in sleeves, it's bare knees. It was 635 for 5. So I'd gone from either 545 for 3 to 5 reps to 635 for 5 in 4 months.
Oh,
and
really
then then put knee wraps on and did 765 in training, and then 800 at the meet.
Yeah.
And about a month after that was the first time I actually did go to Elite FTS. So it was like 1 year after the original trip was supposed to happen. And I'm out there, and I'm sponsored by them, and that was the first time I had been around multiply lifting.
Yeah.
It was when I went to my first meet to compete. It was also the first meet I had been to, and I just didn't know what to expect. I still did not know what powerlifting equipment was really.
Wow.
I knew that while we were getting rack heights at that meet, there was a guy who asked me what I was opening at, and I said 725, and he said, "Me too," like kind of scoffed, and he's like, "Me too," in the bench.
Oh, well.
And he then bombed out. So that wasn't a great first impression for equipped lifting on me.
I can guess what his 3 bench attempts were too. The first one took 7 seconds to get to 3 inches above his chest, and then they took it. The second one, they put more weight on, got it to his chest, and then couldn't move it. And the third one, he almost killed himself. Standard 3 bench attempts in multiply.
So and then that time at Elite, I'm doing my thing, lifting, raw or wearing my knee wraps, and I squatted 635 for 10 or 11 there in knee wraps, and my whole workout took like an hour and a half, and then there's like 2 monolifts with 7 guys on each one, and they did like 11 reps of squats total in like 3.5 hours, and I was just like, this is weird, like and it was from there. Yeah, and then the next year, James, the same James Smith who once said that Chad Smith guy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, or he's training like an asshole or whatever, comes to work for me, and that's if there's 1 year, one situation I had to pick out that like this formed, or this was the biggest catalyst towards the way that I coach and understand training now, it's that year with James, and so much of the stuff that people always point to. And they tell you, read Super Training, read Science and Practice of Strength Training, read Charlie Francis, read Yesus, Issa, and all this stuff. People tell you to read that shit, and they don't know what the fuck the words on that page mean. They are barely
true.
They are barely English.
Yeah.
James Smith knew and knows
Yeah.
what they meant, and I saw him put them into practice, and it was so simple and intuitive.
Yeah.
And it was like beyond like a light bulb. It was the whole fucking like
the whole thing, yeah.
lamp and light store turned on instantaneously. And I was like, it just totally changed my perspective on it. He made me understand why max effort, dynamic effort, West Side type of stuff for athletes isn't the best thing. Not that it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just not quite the best. Giving me the understanding of the Charlie Francis Cup analogy, and you can only fill it up so much, and weight room is general for athletes and all that. And so that was the big piece. So it was that sort of transition time, with maybe the initial catalyst being James saying I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, to then starting to train for powerlifting, that really created the shift to then go on and do the work with Mike and with you, and understand about individualization and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny because when you think about both of our journeys, it sort of strikes me as like there's these these phases we're talking about of like coaching, and it like the kernel that exists from the beginning was that as athletes we were definitely both really interested in how it worked and in the idea of like how does the program work and the training and that. And then that kind of like spark, I think, seems to transfer into like, well, you're going to kind of pursue it. And if you have this inclination to figure it out, you're always going to be looking for some kind of better answer or some kind of better thing. And so it's like, without that as a coach, like it's got to be difficult to go anywhere. If you are just looking for the right answer or looking for an answer, you're going to get stuck because the first flashy thing like West Side that comes along is going to be like, well, this is the way to do it,
Yeah, and I see, specific to West Side, and it's not to pick on West Side that much, but I see now, younger coaches or lifters, they come in and they're 22, 23 years old, and they're just starting to figure this stuff out. And I have less patience for it now in 2019 because there's so much more body of evidence of like, let's look at what the 100 best lifters in the world do, the 1,000 best lifters in the world do. But to back this up maybe 4 or 5 years, then I was seeing people who like they were really into West Side. And this is also a time, 2013, 2014, we were writing, JTS was putting out articles like West Side versus the World, like Why Speed Work Doesn't Work, like an incredible editorial piece that I wrote, still the best title I've ever created, The Bench Shirt is Being Pulled Over Your Eyes, where we were writing these controversial articles or whatever, and getting into, I had to like allot a good bit of time per day to just argue with people on the internet about how to lift. And then when I actually really cared about this type of thing, I would see these 22, 23-year-old people try and argue with me, and it's like, and the age I guess is irrelevant because I was like 27 and 28, but I was strong and good at powerlifting and they weren't. So and for a while I'd get mad and be like, who the fuck is this little dumbass trying to argue with me? And then I was like, I was that dumbass. I'm gonna give them 2 years, and in 2 years they will have figured it out, they will have changed their ways, or they just don't get it. And it's that idea that you got to be progressing in the understanding, which is, again, not to pick specifically on West Side type of stuff, but shocking, alarming, amazing to me to see some of these people who have been doing so much of the same stuff for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and it's like
it's incredible
in such an objective sport where you can so easily measure improvement when it doesn't exist to keep going, trying to keep doing the same thing.
We see the same with the Bulgarian stuff. I mean, the fact that there's people in either one of the sports, weightlifting or powerlifting, that still bring up the idea of the Bulgarian system, where it's like, it's just, and this always kind of comes back to the idea of like principles in training. If you can't define, like every single program that exists can be defined by the same parameters, like volume, intensity, the weights on the bar. Like we can just look at any millions of programs and compare them to each other. But for some reason, there's this belief, and I think it's true with the West Side fanatics, true with the Bulgarian fanatics, where it's like there's a mysticism around it that like there's something more than what the data tells you. You know, the data tells you generally that your results are not getting better, you're not improving, but there's like some kind of mystery, and it's always like, you know, well, the Bulgarians were really great, or you know, West Side they have this, or it's like there's something that's happening that's somehow intangible that can't be included in the data. But then they use you kind of fall into this trap of like using justification for it. And in weightlifting you see all the time, like, blame the athlete, right? Oh man, we trained really hard. He hit this lift 18 times in training before this, but then he bombed the meet. And when you step back and look at it from the standpoint of like understanding the principles behind training, you can look and be like, well, it's really fucking obvious why he bombed out, because he destroyed himself 18 times before this, right?
The Bulgarian one, you know, and I see this in like YouTube comments on our videos on this topic. Of,
Yeah.
You know, critique of Bulgarian or Bulgarian system explained. Something is when there's fucking YouTube commenters, the scum of the earth, worst people in history. Only if you post with your real name, it's fine.
Yeah.
If you post, you know, like.
There's an
whatever,
infinite number
like,
of combinations that can create a name on YouTube.
Yeah, like Muscle Monkey 69. Like, I don't give a fuck about your opinion. Like, and they post on there like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. My squat has gone up,
Yeah.
you know, 30 pounds in the last
Yeah.
8 weeks.
I squat 275 with this.
Yeah, and it's like, for someone to argue Bulgarian with you, like, unless it is a Bulgarian person, where is their base of understanding? Like, it's like, did you watch the video when Max said that his squat went up 52 kilos in 6 weeks?
Yeah.
Did you stop watching it? Did you stop watching it then to not see what happened for the next 10 years?
Well, you explained everything I need to know in the first 12 seconds. I'm done.
Sounds great.
There's another 10 minutes here. I don't know what that could be
kilos
about.
in 6 weeks.
It's funny. It's a very funny thing to be, but again, like, it's like when you're not rooted in that, like, that concept of understanding the process or understanding what happens, you know, you end up stuck in a place where you can only understand the answers. You can only understand, okay, this guy got better or didn't get better. It's the program has to either work or it's some other reason. Like, the Bulgarian system works unless people fuck up, unless it's the athlete who's an idiot or they don't have enough courage. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so it's like, because that can't be wrong, everything in the universe is wrong. Gravity, there's something wrong with gravity. The program's not working.
Yeah. You know, my last thought about the stuff from James, who was so hugely influential on me. Global Sport Concepts is his company, his website. Go read his stuff. It's going to be, you're going to slog through it. It's tough, but worthwhile. Do the consultations with him. All that stuff is really good. And this is something I think that's held true for my entire career, athlete, coach, learning, is I was really able to see him take these sport training ideas, track and field specifically, and take the concepts, the principles from them, and apply them to strength sports.
Yeah.
And for me, as he helped me with my own training, was apply those ideas to powerlifting and strongman. And even talking about like short to long and long to short, which is like a sprint training idea, and apply that to the moving events in strongman, and explain, all right, well, if you're someone who's really strong but maybe needs to develop the endurance, they're going to do a short to long or vice versa, and to be able to extrapolate some of those ideas out was a really significant thing to me, and I think a great take home for people as they develop their coaching philosophies is don't be narrow-minded in that I'm only going to listen to this one coach, even if it's me and Max. Don't just listen to us. I mean, just mostly listen to us. But and don't just, and that you're a powerlifting coach, so you're only going to listen to powerlifters and powerlifting coaches. Don't do that either. The more of my powerlifting coaching ideas have come from weightlifting and track and field than they have from powerlifting.
Yeah.
And weightlifting and track and field, those are Olympic sports in which governments, spend hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to develop athletes, educate their coaches, and win medals. That is a really big deal to China, Russia, the former Soviet Union,
Yeah.
East Germany. They were spending a shitload of time, money, and effort on learning how to do this stuff right. They weren't trying to learn how to coach powerlifting right because that didn't win them Olympic medals and bring them nationalistic glory, But they did spend a lot of effort on that. So seek that information out.
Yeah.
Understand it from a principle-based, from the principle-based side of things, and extrapolate those ideas out to what you are interested in improving at. Powerlifting, strongman. Take those track and field ideas, apply them to weightlifting. If you're working with athletes, whatever it is, that's going to be the best information that you can get, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I think the progression is like that. It's going to be like every coach is probably going to start. The first thing you do when you start is you need some tool, right? You're going to grab onto something. So you grab onto programs or something simple like that, or exercises, and then you grow from there as a coach, and you start to understand systems and like how to put a bunch of pieces together to get what you want, and then you eventually get to the point where you understand the principles behind things, and then you can go from there to building anything you want out of the principles. And even using those, once you understand those principles, you can look at every kind of sport training and draw conclusions from that, and be able to transfer knowledge that's specific to whatever sport, track and field, into something that's going to benefit you in weightlifting or powerlifting. So obviously, if I was going to suggest to a person now to start, I would start the opposite way that you and I did, where I would start with understanding the principles and understanding the big picture stuff, and then go from there to start creating, systems and workouts and coaching from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And understand the process it's never done.
Yeah.
The changes may become smaller. Like we said, we made a lot of macro changes through this process, and now we're making the micro changes. But like, unless your athlete is hitting bullseye every meet they go out, like there's something to be improved at some part of the process, because we're only talking the program here.
Right.
There's a whole other conscious coaching type of stuff of communicating with the athlete and psychology and all that good stuff. So
what do you think the next step is for someone like yourself or me, where do you see okay, what's the next step that you would have made or that you would make now? Obviously, you're not going to learn some giant new thing. There's obviously tons of new little pieces of data that usually just basically confirm what a lot of coaches have figured out. But do you think there's another level or whatever that you would end up at?
Yeah, I think the sort of next piece to do a better job with is probably monitoring fatigue and being able to quantify fatigue and recovery in a much more objective manner.
Yeah.
And then what the implications are of that in the short term, like on that day's training, on that week's training, on that month's training, and then seeing the longer term trends to adjust.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of think that the next logical progression is the incorporation of tools that didn't exist before. Like obviously, plugging the AI stuff, but the idea of the ability to monitor things that would be too tedious before, and be able to use that data to actually make decisions, because that would become the ultimate in execution, which is going to be the one thing that you can always improve on. Once you understand the principles and the program is the best it can be, then the only next step is incredible execution, right? Is perfect execution of it.
Microchips
in people.
Yeah.
Laser cleans and hologram snatches.
All right. Well, sounds good. Thanks, buddy.
Yep.
Thanks for watching today's episode. Hopefully you gained some new insights from Max and I about our influences to become the coaches that we are now, and some steps that you can take to help you grow as a coach. As always, share the episode, go on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review, write us something funny or nice. We always appreciate that. Check out rhone.com/juglife and pick up some great looking, versatile, functional apparel that you can wear in the gym, at work, wherever you're headed to. And visit jtsstrength.com for all of our online coaching, like Juggernaut AI Powerlifting and Power Building, all our weightlifting options, plus books and Juggernaut apparel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.